Joining us right now is Reagan Economic Adviser Art Laffer, along with Trump Economic Advisor Steve Moore. Gentlemen, good to see you.
Hi, Maria.
Hi, how are you, Maria?
So, Art,
and Steve, it's good to see you.
We've got a great panel here, and we want to get into it because we know that you guys have the nitty-gritty on the economic plan that the president-elect has released. Trump said that he wants to work with technology leaders to encourage innovation. What do you make of the summit, Art? What's your reaction to what we heard yesterday?
Well, I think the summit is great. I think he's doing a terrific job of bringing all these people together to lay out the agenda and get buy-in from all of them, too. He's doing a great job in this transition, and I couldn't be happier.
Steve?
Well, I was interested in that little clip that Blake just played about the issue of the repatriation of capital, Maria, because that's part of the tax plan that my buddy Larry Kudlow and I and Steve Mnuchin put together for Donald Trump, where you're going to bring back, we estimate, about $1 trillion of foreign money, and potentially more than that. And by the way, who are the big winners if you have that repatriation tax holiday? It's the tech companies. It's the Googles. It's the Microsofts. It's the Apples. So I thought it was a very productive meeting, and I think these tech leaders have a lot to gain from a Trump presidency.
Yeah, but did you get a sense that they will bring that money back?
Oh yeah, I think they've been waiting a long time for this. Microsoft has said it's going to bring some of that money back. Apple has estimated over $100 billion of money stored overseas. These companies have been waiting for 10 or 15 years for this moment, Maria. As you know, if they under the old rules, they'd have to pay a 20-25% tax to bring that money back. And by the way, we estimate we can raise about $100 billion in tax revenue. So it's a win-win. We get the money invested here in the United States, right, Arthur? And then we also raise money for the Treasury. And what's not to like?
Yeah. Hey, Steve. Well, Steve, it's Dagan McDowell. Yesterday, during the Federal Reserve meeting on interest rates, the Federal Reserve only increased its likely rate hikes in the coming year from 2 to 3, and didn't even change its growth forecast for the next 3 years. You're talking about 1.9% growth to 2.1% growth in the next 3 years. That essentially says that the tax cuts, tax reform, and regulatory rollback are going to have no impact on the economy. What do you say to that?
That's ridiculous. Yeah, it's totally ridiculous. I mean, we actually estimate that we can double that growth rate. It happened, as Arthur knows, it happened under Reagan. But it's not just taxes, by the way. It's the pro-America energy policy. We think we can produce about $100 billion more a year in American energy. The rollback of Obamacare. Those are all very positive things for the economy. Now, look, I agree with the Fed that if we don't make any policy changes, we're going to stay with less than 2% growth. I mean, this is, the Obama administration is putting out this line that Trump is inheriting this great economy. He's not. We need real policy changes to get us back to a very prosperous period of 3 to 4% growth.
Peter?
Fellas, one of the things that's happened is that you've seen that the Fed is leaving center stage. They have basically been, they've really been the driving force. They've now shifted, and everyone is looking to other things that I would put broadly into fiscal policy. Can you talk about that changing of the guard? Because I think that's a crucial, for anybody who's looking at the markets, I think that's a crucial question from here on out.
Well, if that's directed to me, I'd simply say that I've made the case for the last couple of years. I learned this stuff from Arthur Laffer. Right now, I think, Arthur, the problem with the American economy is not our monetary policy. It's we've got a terrible tax policy, an overwhelmingly negative regulatory climate out there. And if you clean that up, I think you've got, I don't know, I think we got clean sailing ahead. What do you think?
Well, I think the interest rate policy is a real problem, too, Steve. With interest rates as low as they are, no one is willing to make loans in risky projects. No one's able to put money into housing for people who are new house buyers. So low interest rates have really held this economy back. And the sooner Janet Yellen moves off center stage and really lets markets do their job of setting rates properly, we should have a 10-year bond yield in a year and a half. If this economy does as you say it will, Steve, and I agree with you, we should have a 10-year bond yield between 4.5% and 6.5% in a year and a half if we're going to have a boom in that growth. And I'm looking forward to that. Janet Yellen would hold that back if she had her way.
Steve and Art, this is Mike Huckabee. One of the things that always intrigues me when I see the picture of these guys yesterday in that meeting with Donald Trump, you have an assemblage of all these high-tech giants who run their companies like capitalists, but they do their politics like socialists. Would you explain to me, because both of you guys are smarter than me, then again, virtually everyone is smarter than me, help me understand why these capitalists do their politics opposite of their own best interest?
The answer is so simple, Mike, that I'm going to let Steve answer it.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I would say, first of all, I would say most of the executives at that table, Governor and Maria, were Democrats and people who supported Hillary in this election. So I thought it was a very smart move politically. I mean, Trump is crazy like a fox when it comes to a lot of this stuff. I mean, he knows what he's doing. It's like Vito Corleone, you know, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. I'm not saying they're his enemies, but these aren't people who've been strong supporters. Why it is that Silicon Valley governor has consistently been so liberal when it comes to economic policy, I don't have a clue. I can't figure it out. I know you've been to Silicon Valley and talked to these folks. I don't get why they don't understand sound economics.
Well, we just talked to Bill Daley, and, you know, I basically said to Bill Daley, look, I mean, how come Obama hasn't done any of this stuff? I mean, you see what Carrier's doing, and you see Apple talking about, you know, doing a plant here, and you know, everybody's getting in line. And he said, well, we'll see if it works. I mean, this is a new experiment. We have not had these kinds of policies in a long time, Art. How long do you expect for it to take to actually see impact?
Well, it depends on how he does the policies. And Steve and I have always wanted them to do the corporate tax rate reduction right away to give a pump to the system. It's going to take a lot longer to do the income tax changes and Obamacare changes. Those are going to take longer. So if you have a delay factor, if you know they're going to cut tax rates next year, we're going to have a heck of a bad economy this year because everyone's going to defer their income to the lower tax year, just what happened with Reagan as well. So we need something to jumpstart the economy right away, and that has to be the corporate tax, the death tax, 100% expensing of capital purchases. They need to be done in the first 90 days, and then we just might miss that bullet of a very bad first year.
Well, you know, you say that, but the new talking point on the left is that President Obama is handing President-elect Trump a very strong economy, Steve Moore.
Well,
you and I heard it.
That's the silliest.
Yeah, it isn't.
Bill Daley just said it.
Look, I know.
Bill Daley is silly.
This is the new talking point. Yeah. I mean, look, I could go through the litany of statistics, but, you know, when you still have, 14 million Americans that are out of a job, when you still have 95 million Americans that are not in the workforce, you know, when you have 42 million people on food stamps, and when you've got the Fed saying that, you know, we're looking at less than 2% growth, that is not a healthy economy. But I was actually pleasantly surprised by something that Donald Trump said to these Silicon Valley executives yesterday. He said, I'm going to make it easier for you to trade. I thought, wow, that's fantastic. That's what we need. You know, Silicon Valley wants two things in particular, in addition to the repatriation. They want trade because these are international companies. And number two, they want high-skilled immigrants to come in and produce the new technologies. And Donald Trump, people forget this, Donald Trump has said, I do want the scientists and the engineers and the mathematicians, the brainiacs, as I call them, to come into this country and create the next generation of technologies. That's huge for Silicon Valley.
It's been, hey, those technology companies, guys, it's been easy street dealing with the Obama administration in the last 4 years. No antitrust enforcement at all, increasing concentration of power in very few hands, net neutrality, you name it, they got it, and they ought to be nervous.
We'll see.
Well,
any reaction to the meeting yesterday? I mean, are they going to work together? They weren't supporting him.
They're going to work together, clearly, Maria, because what can they do? He's in charge. He's the only game in town. The reason they like the Democrats so much is the Democrats are much more amenable to accepting political contributions in exchange for actions. You know, when you're a free market type, you get your hands out of the market. When you're like the other side, you put your hands in, and that's when political contributions are always most helpful. But one thing I want to advise a little bit on this repatriation. Those funds are not sitting there offshore waiting to come in. They're held in subsidiary companies, and many of them won't change their location at all. I mean, there will be a benefit here, but it's going to be a lot less than $3 trillion flowing back into the United States de novo. A lot less than that, because this is not de novo. These people have the funds still in the U.S. They're just held in the subsidiaries' names rather than the home company's names.
So what are you talking about? Half of that, $1.5 trillion, or what? Do you have any estimate?
I would use it's going to be a net positive, and the reason it's going to be a net positive is because we're going to lower the tax rate here. We're going to make them want to bring the money back into the U.S. to increase output, employment, and production, and more investments. That's what the real key is what Steve and Larry have done on the corporate tax tax rate reduction is so important. You've got to attract the money back, not punish people for not bringing it back. It doesn't work that way.
Great analysis and great conversation. Art Laffer, Steve Moore, thank you. We'll be right back.